Okay, so picking it up where we left off, we have the 2x2 cube, right? And then we have in the scene panel, we set it to metric, length to metric, so that we can get feedback on what that 2 means. It means 2 meters, right? So if we go to other parts of the interface, we can see similar feedback, whereas with the light, we go to the light properties, and before I said that was 30 meters, right? So we can see that it actually is 30 meters. We're getting that feedback. And other fields, we can see feedback of centimeters, kilometers, centimeters, and so on. And when we go back, we can change that back to none, and then those disappear, right? So this is an important distinction to make, that this is really just a feedback, a display difference. The size of any of things haven't changed or anything like that. So let's further illustrate that. Another option is if we have this set to anything but none, let's set it back to metric, we can change the unit scale. So let's change it to 0.5 and see what happens there. The cube doesn't change in size because we've already created it, but the display appears to be 1 meter by 1 meter by 1 meter. So what it's doing is it's just telling us it's 1 meter when it really isn't. It's kind of cutting it in half, right? So now let's see what happens if I move this cube out of the way and I create a new cube. You see, it's actually still creating a 1 unit by 1 unit cube, and now it's just telling us that that 1 unit isn't a meter anymore. It's actually half of a meter, right? Because it's actually a 2 by 2 by 2 cube. So if we go to the top view, it's still 2 by 2. I'll show you what I mean here. So we go down to display, and we can see that the scale isn't of the display. Remember, the grid size is not affected by this unit scale for whatever reason, whereas the cube size is, or the cube display is. So let's go back here and just put this to 0.5, and now we can see that the cube is actually 2 by 2 by 2, but 2 is now, 1 is only 0.5 instead of 1, and so now it's only, you get the idea, right, the math. So let's put this back to 1, and put this back to 1. Okay, and then there's one other thing we can do, and we'll illustrate this even further, and that is that if we go up here, it's meters by default. So basically it's this by default, even though it displays this when you first open Blender. So just know that it's meters by default, but you can change it to feet, right? And then an interesting thing happens again, and that is that now the cube is being displayed as a size of 2 feet by 2 feet by 2 feet. In other words, 2 units by 2 units by 2 units. Now this is a little bit of a problem, and we don't want that, because we don't want to change what we think the size of something is arbitrarily, seemingly arbitrarily anyway. What it's trying to do is say, okay, well, you want the units to be feet, we'll help you with that. We'll change the scale by this value to make 1 unit equal 1 foot. Okay, and so that's fine, but that's really not what you want. You don't really want that. Why they did that, I'm really not sure. There's arguments for it and against it, but I'm more against it than I am for it. Okay, so I would suggest, if you want to set it to feet, set this to actually 1, so that you can have your values be in read in feet, but you're not affecting the scale. So it's actually properly read now. It's 6 feet and 6.5 feet, right? So that's what we want. We don't want to change the size of it, okay? So, or the display of the size of it. The size stayed the same, but the display of the size changed. Okay, and so another thing is, if we go back and change this to meters and go back to feet again, see, it went back to that scale. If I add a 1 in here, it does funny things with the math. I figured it out, but it's not worth going over in this video. You can do it if you want. It doesn't matter, but now you have to add 1 plus a foot sign, and then it'll become a foot. Okay, so but it's better just to keep the scale to 1, and then if you go 1 foot, it's a foot. If you go 6 feet, it's 6 feet, and so on. Okay, that's much better.